Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you are doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to continue our look at horror-themed board games, and we're going to be taking a look at Pandemonium, the fantasy survival horror and a miniatures game. That is from Game Forger. This was kind of an earlier Kickstarter game. It is pretty rare. I don't see a lot of people talk about this game very often, if at all. And it has gone up in price a lot over the last couple of years. Recently, I've seen it on eBay and BGG going up to like $200 or something. And I just want to make it clear, just right out of the gate here, that just because I'm making a video about this game doesn't mean that I am encouraging people to go and spend the collector's prices on this game. I don't think it's not worth anywhere near $150 or $200. I don't think. If you could find a copy, get lucky and maybe get a copy for $50 or maybe get it in a trade for a couple games that you just don't play anymore, then that's how I got it. And I'm pretty happy with it like that. But if I paid a lot of money for this game, I don't think I would like it as much as I do. It is a very difficult game to learn. The rule book is a real mess. Some of the cards, lots of edge cases where you kind of have to rule on the fly. It can take a long time to learn. Luckily, there is a pretty good Learn to Play video on YouTube from Lance from the Learn to Play channel. And his video, it's long, but it goes through all of the rules. So that's usually how I learn to play this game or relearn to play this game is I'll just kind of flip through his video. But it does have some interesting things going on. And it has some interesting card decks, some interesting mechanisms. Those are the things that keep it in my collection. And also the theming. The theming is really cool. So this is kind of like an ultimate horror movie board game. And there just aren't a lot of board games like this out there. This is kind of like a big love letter to B cinema, to trash cinema, to USA Up All Night, Friday Night Scare type movies, midnight movies, that kind of thing. It's a big homage. It's a parody. There's a satire, and there's kind of like straight up theft in some of the IPs. But it can be a pretty fun experience if you're looking for something like that. And it has a few things that I do really like. Two of those things we're going to take a look at in detail. Now, these two decks here, the loot deck and the random event deck, are really cool. Always a lot of fun to draw cards from that deck. So in Pandemonium, I would put Pandemonium kind of in the same group as games like a Zombicide or Wander, the Cult of Barnacle Bay, and you are setting up large tiles, of which there are quite a few. I think the game comes with like 7 double-sided tiles that have the spaces on there, so you're not out exploring. It's not an exploring style dungeon crawl. It's more like Zombicide, more like Wander, Cult of Barnacle Bay. You're always going to set up 4 tiles for your scenario. It's scenario-based. There's no campaign. There's I think like 5 basic scenarios that are all co-op, and then there's a couple scenarios that are semi-co-op. I think one is fully competitive, kind of like a battle royale, and then there's one that's like 1 versus many. So there's a few different ways to play the game, but you're going to set up your tile, you're going to pick a scenario, you're going to pick some characters, and then go through that scenario. So this is the first scenario here, and the characters I am playing as are the Fury. So we've got Furiosa from Mad Max there. We have the Master, who is basically Pai Mei there, and then we have the Stripper. So I love this party here, the Stripper, the Master, and the Fury. And in this scenario, we are starting here in this square, and we need to escape the board because there is this mad god, and he is out there, and he's going to be chasing us. This is one of the bosses. The boss mechanisms in the game are one thing I do not like. Unless the scenario specifically states that you can kill a boss, you can't. These are not necessarily monsters to fight, but they are things to avoid. They are obstacles to avoid. And this is like some kind of like crazy mad god. So I guess it makes sense that my mere mortals, my stripper couldn't kill a mad god, but he is going to be moving one space per turn. And if he ever lands on a space with a player character, that player character dies immediately. So you want to avoid that guy. So the way that we can escape in this scenario, this is just kind of like a basic example of how the scenarios work, is we can either escape from this boat or we can escape in this car. To escape from the car, or the truck, I should say, we have to grab this battery and put it in the car. Then the car can carry 4 players off to safety. So that is one way to win the game. To escape with the boat, we have to come up here and we have to grab the oars and then take the oars back to the boat, and then 2 people can escape on the boat. So that is the main way that this scenario is won. Any other situation, the players lose. And this game uses has a timer. So the game basically takes place 8 rounds. 3 of those rounds are in relative safety of daytime. And then we have 5 rounds that are in nighttime. And when nighttime hits, all of the spaces are considered to be in darkness. And if a player character ever begins their turn in a dark space, they lose some fear. And if you ever get too scared, you become panicked and then you can't do any of your actions. So to combat dark spaces, one of the players always has to like make a beeline for when it gets dark to the generator, and they have to turn on the generator depending on what they roll on a D6. That will give you certain number of rounds during the night, which the generator lights up. So you can prevent some of the darkness there. So the characters, there are a lot of characters, and they are basically all kind of parodies of established characters, of tropes, of archetypes in various horror movies and science fiction movies, pulp movies. So we have the Huntress there. I believe that's from Terminator 2 there. We have the hero, of course, Ash from Army of Darkness there. We have the lovers. I love this combination, just like a quarterback and a cheerleader together as a couple. That's really cool, very thematic there. The mother, of course, Ripley. The mechanic. We have the geek. We have the soldier, probably Dolph Lundgren there. The lifeguard from Baywatch, I guess. The girl, some little like possessed demon girl there. The thief, the doctor, and the preacher. The flip side of the cards are in Spanish. This is a Spanish game here. So the preacher. So the characters are going to have a couple stats. You're going to have your basic hit points over here, your fear, your sanity over here. Then you have a stat for your combat that tells you how many combat dice you roll, how many defense dice you roll, how many actions you can take. This is your agility. It's basically for initiative, like what your turn order, and then your willpower, how well you can resist the scares of the monsters. And each of the characters will also have one special ability. Each of the characters is going to hold 2 items, or they can equip a 2-handed item, and they can hold a number of items in their backpacks. Then you also get a couple character cards for some of the enemies, at least one here for when you are playing against the super enemy. This is kind of like the main bad guy. I think this is used for the 1 versus many mode. I've actually never played that mode before. And then we have a couple of the characters here for when you are actually fighting the bosses. There is one scenario where you're going to be fighting against basically Pinhead and a kind of like blob guy. And so in that scenario, you can actually kill the bosses. So that's what you will use there. The miniatures are kind of weird. They are bust style, so they're cut off at the legs. I'm of 2 minds about this. It's kind of cool because the details that you get, because they're enlarged, are kind of cool, so you can really see the details, but they're also just kind of weird looking. You get a lot of miniatures for all the characters, and just because you're not playing one of the characters doesn't mean you might not need the miniature, because one of the cool things this game does, so this is one of the things I like, is there's a pretty large deck of allies that you have available to you during the game. And at certain points, like for instance, you can go to this room here and you can use this telephone to call for an ally to help you. I believe there's another token somewhere that you can radio transmit for an ally to help you. And so when you do that, you draw a card from the ally deck. And there are two versions of each character. And if you draw one of the characters that you are playing, you can just discard it and draw again. So here we drew the evil preacher. So if we drew the evil version of this ally when we were told to draw an ally card, then we take the preacher miniature, and he actually will then come out as an enemy. And he's an evil character, and he comes out on the board, and now he is another enemy that we have to deal with the same enemy stats and same kind of abilities that an enemy might have. So that's a pretty cool way to use the characters that you aren't playing with. And then there are also good characters, good allies, if I can find one. There we go. So if we drew this one, the good thief here, then you would take you would take your thief, and then you would be able to use that thief as an ally. He would come out on the board, and the character controlling him could take a number of actions with that ally to help the other players. So this is a really fun deck to draw from. I like the fact that there are evil and good. Sometimes you will mix in this helicopter rescue that you will need to draw from the ally deck. You will need to radio for the helicopter to come and pick you up. But really cool, a really neat use of the characters you aren't using in the game, and something that I don't see a lot of in these kinds of games. So speaking of enemies, there are a number of different enemies, and a lot of the enemies are based on horror icons. So we have, for instance, we have the evil doll here, which is like Chucky. So he comes out. We have Reanimated here, which is, of course, based off of the Reanimator, the great scene from Reanimator, Dr. Halsey, I believe, when his body is carrying around his decapitated head. Lovely, lovely scene there. We have here what is like the slasher or something. So definitely Michael Myers there. We have Sadako from The Ring crawling out of the well. I really like that a lot. And then we have the critters here. I think these guys are called like Famungus or something. And then we have a few kind of like generic enemies, like some kind of like aberrations or demons or monsters. These three I wish were better. I always get these three mixed up. You can see they just all kind of look similar and a little generic. And then I really like this mini here, this specter, this ghost lady. She's like stretching her face off. That's really cool. And then an almost kind of like Hellraiser-esque, maybe a Silent Hill style creature there. So lots of enemies. The enemies have basic kinds of stats. And the stats for the enemies will be found on the back of the scenario book here. And then each enemy has a different thing that happens when they die. And that's what differentiates them. And that's what adds a somewhat of a puzzly nature to the combat. And it's one thing that you do have to think about, because you have to think about the order in which you are going to destroy enemies. So, for instance, the possessed here, this is like kind of like a cultist and possessed cultist here. And when they die, you draw an ally card, and you might draw a good ally. So maybe one of your friends was turned into a cultist, or you might, and so when you kill the possessed, your friend comes back to life. Or you might draw an evil ally. In that case, your friend got turned into a cultist. You killed the cultist, and then they came back as an evil person, and then you have to fight them. When a killer toy appears on each portal, a killer toy appears on each portal of the board. So when you kill Chucky, more Chucky dolls appear on the portals, and these portals are where the enemies will spawn in the game. The portals, there's one on each tile, can also be used as fast travel spots for the characters. And to do that, a character will move onto a portal, spend an action point, and then you have to draw one of these dimension cards. And the dimension cards will have a little stat test that you have to do in order to use that different portal, in order to move from one portal to the next. This is another really cool kind of mechanism that I like, they added this neat little thematic kind of little mini game just to be able to use the teleporters. If you successfully use the teleporter, you get to collect a couple of souls. And those are these red cubes here. And those are used as a currency that you can spend to help augment some of the bad luck in the game. And you will also get a skill point. And this is another thing that I think is pretty cool about the game, is when you get a skill point, the first time you get a skill point, you get to pick a skill tree to work on. So we have different trees here. We have retribution, illumination, corruption, and survival. And then when you get a skill, you get to put a little token on the first skill in that tree. And then each time you gain a skill point after that, you can select a different point on the skill tree. Once you fill up the entire card, then the next time you can pick another skill tree to start working on. And you will have different things like you can add, make it easier to use weapons. You can add to your attack. You can add dice to your weapons. So corruption is basically if you want to be an attacker. Retribution helps you just kind of mitigate some of the luck in the game. And then you have illumination will kind of upgrade your character stats. And then survival also just kind of upgrades your character's stats in a different way. And so a pretty cool little skill tree mini game to work with when you level up. I do kind of like that. And what are some of the other things like? So on the board here, you might see these hearts. So these are health packs that you can pick up to heal. Sometimes you will put out these weapons like this, like spiritual, this a ritual dagger here, or this basically like the Necronomicon here. And characters can pick those up and they can add them to their character sheet, and that'll give them permanent bonuses for combat and defense. But let's take a look at some of the decks of the cards. These are the things that I think are really cool about this game here. One thing is, so we've already looked at the ally deck. We've looked at the portal deck that you can use to teleport. We also have this deck of Pact cards, and these are packs that when your character dies, you randomly draw one of these, and then they come back to life, but they might be a traitor, or they might have to do something that maybe will hamper the other players. They're not all bad, but this is usually, it'll give the player who comes back to life something else they have to deal with when the time comes. And if they successfully deal with their pact, they do get some experience and some souls to spend. So again, another kind of cool thing that you can do in the game. There is this deck here of combo cards. There are 12 combo cards, I believe. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, there are 12. This deck never gets reshuffled. So once you use all 12 of these in a game, that's it for the rest of the game. And these are kind of a pressure luck mini game for the players to work cooperatively. So this deck here encourages the players to work together to take out groups of more powerful enemies. And so what you do is you can spend an action and you can flip over your combo card, and that will give you 3 different types of attacks, basically. You have the top one here where you have to pull your dice together. So if you had 2 characters and they were fighting together and they wanted to pull off a combo, they wanted to pull off the 1000 wrecking hits combo here, you would pull all of their attack dice together and then you would roll it. And before you roll, you have to pick which of the 2 attacks you are doing. Are you going to go for 4 hits and do a super attack? Or are you going to go for 2 hits and do kind of a lesser attack? And then if you hit that, you do it. If you miss, then the bad thing happens to those characters that participated in the attack. This is really, really cool. And there are all kinds of different combos. We have the 4 Fists of the Jade Dragon, Slaughter at Dawn, One for All and All for One, Brothers of Cursed Blood, the Pendulum of the Red Death, the Incredible Shadowless Kick, Wang Fei Hong's Shadowless Kick there, Interdimensional Portals, Whirlwind of Demonic Fire, Unchained Vengeance, Fright Night, Silent Night, and the Infernal Exterminator. So really cool little kind of pressure luck mini game here. And then we get to the item deck. This is a huge item deck. I think there's like 150 different items you can get. There are weapons and objects. One of the cool things you can do with these items is you can discard an item that your character has equipped or is stored in their backpack to create a trap. So you can use all of these items to create traps. And then you can lay these little traps down around the board, kind of like discarding the item, using something to make a makeshift trap. And then when the enemies move through that, it causes them to become stunned and they slow down. So it's a way to kind of like stop the enemies from moving around the board. So there are all kinds of different things like herbs here to help you heal. There are funny weapons like a frying pan. There are weapons like the Atlantean sword, a chain hook. We have a flamethrower. Man, that's a great weapon. It does 12 damage. We have the Mask of the Black Death. So all kinds of cool like weapons and just all different things. A shovel, the dragon ring. Long ago, the mighty dragon reigned supreme in the 9 celestial circles. Now you possess their power. The voices have overwhelmed you incessantly since you put that ring on your index finger. Creatures with less than 4 fury cannot attack you, nor can they perceive you. Okay, that's pretty cool. What do we have here? Demon blood. You're invincible to the creatures for 1 round. They do not see or attack you. We have an old World War II grenade, a phantasm sphere. Love that. And these cards are all upside down and stuff. We have a razor blade, the demonic book, the hunting rifle, a card holder. So all kinds of cool things. I would say that this game has, a similar style loot to it, very pulpy, that very, very similar to Secrets of the Lost Tomb. And it's always fun to pick up one of these cards. There's all kinds of loot, and I like the way that you can also use them for traps. So super, super cool loot deck in this game. And then we have the random encounter deck, which is, again, about 150 cards, tons of random encounters in this game. And these are both good and bad, mostly bad, but they can also be beneficial. And they're all very, very thematic. So sometimes you will draw these here that have a red skull. That means these have to be done right away, right when you draw them. So this is like the Cursed Reflection. The Whispers have guided you. You draw back the dusty white sheet which covers the old mirror and look at yourself through the glass. Alarmed, you realize that you are on the wrong side. Pick a dimensional card. So that would be one of those cards over here in that dimensional deck. Pick a dimensional card and beat the challenge, or lose a number of life points equal to the number of characters on your map pile. Okay, so we have a magic pentagram you might find. Within the robes, you can still see their uncorrupted remains. You place yourselves in the same position in the pentagram and recite the verses. Silence, nothing happens. Wait a minute. Roll a d6 and win a number of souls equal to the results. So if the events do not have a red skull, you can hold on to those and use those when you want. Sometimes you will also draw different kinds of creatures from the event deck, like death here. All players roll a d6. Whoever throws a 1 dies. That has to be done right away. You might come across this nightmare here, +1 fear to all characters. So there's all kinds of cool things to come across in this event deck. I love it. It's a super fun event deck. Very thematic. Everything feels like it's from some kind of B movie or some kind of trash cinema. There we go there. We have the Sandman. Love that. That's hilarious. The Shadow Con. Putrefaction. Do you want to play a game? What's that? Jigsaw there. But yeah, really, really cool event deck. One of the more creative event decks and one of the more thematic event decks. I always like drawing from these cards. The art is pretty good for the most part. The writing can be really hit or miss. I believe the English was a translation from Spanish. And so there is some clunky phrasing, but nothing too bad. But yeah. The game has some interesting things going for it. Unfortunately, it's really hard to learn. There are a lot of times where you're not really getting to know what to do. The game is a little more convoluted than it needs to be, but it is also kind of fun, and especially if you're looking for something to scratch that midnight movie itch, then I think this could be a fun game, but I do not recommend spending the kind of like collector's prices that it is going for. It's not a great game. It's a game that if I found on clearance and I bought, or like I got mine in a trade, that you got rid of a couple games that you weren't really playing anymore, and you were looking for something to scratch this midnight movie itch. Pandemonium gets probably closer to that than just about any other game that I know of. But this is not an endorsement to go to eBay, to go to BGG, and spend the big bucks on this game. I just wanted to show it as kind of a weird curiosity. It's a game that just doesn't get a lot of attention. It probably doesn't deserve a lot of attention, but it probably deserves a little more attention than it is given. Sorry, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at Pandemonium. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.